answer you because I have not studied Hong Kong firms specifically. Of course, much of what we see in China in the early days was started from Hong Kong or from Taiwan. The overseas Chinese investment was critical. But perhaps you could tell us a little bit, if you don't mind being put on the spot, of what your answer to that question, because I know you're studying it very hard. Would you like a microphone?
That's very smart.
It is a very good question, okay? I think Hong Kong companies, there are two types of company. First one, the family business. I think in terms of family business, unless they begin to collaborate with other people or they begin to take over the Chinese companies, these are the losers right now. There are so-called multinationals, Hong Kong multinationals, but they are the minorities. And these companies, they have transformed. And I think you can actually see that, there are companies like China Light and Power actually in China. Okay, it's doing a pretty good job. Even MTI is doing pretty good job right now. But then I think most of the majority of the family business are losing, unless, of course, the family business have a stronghold on certain competitive advantage which is not possessed by their competitors right now. Those are my personal observations. If you want to ask me more, I'll be very happy to share with you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, my question is, to what extent are these Chinese firms, innovators, are tapping talents from outside China?
Very good question. The answer to that, I think, is that in the early days, they were looking for people who might have been foreigners, if they're a larger company, a foreign scientist or an engineer. But today, the best source is either locally trained people or returnees. And the comment we've heard from a number of companies is that local scientists and engineers have very good training in the theory of what they're professing, but they don't have as much opportunity in their education to practice it or to ask tough questions. Whereas the returnees that may have done a PhD in the US or Europe have been through a process where that's more common. And so they find the returnees are initially very much more able to lead a group of people in an innovation process. Often those people can then work with young graduates and help them to develop their ability to answer tough questions. That's my observation. Yes.
Professor, did I hear correctly that you said R&D is using cash to produce ideas, and innovation is to use the ideas to get cash? If this is the case, can you inform us some real cases with successful cases? And meanwhile, Nicholas is going to be the Secretary of Innovation in Science and Technology, and I think he will be responsible to turn ideas into cash for all of us. Thank you.
Yes, well, that's a very, I believe you heard me correctly, and that was actually not my invention, that phrase. It was told to me by a Chinese CEO. So the point I think that makes is that you can put money into R&D, but unless you're actually focused on customer needs and turning that money, those ideas into workable products and processes and services, then you're wasting your money. So the link between the R&D and the customer innovation is very key. And so that process inside the company where you encourage people to come up with ideas and give them opportunities to carry them forward to some degree is very important. So in all the companies we talk to, multinationals are well developed in their process for looking at innovation in 3 stages. there's an ideation stage where you come up with ideas that they think will be practical. Then you have some kind of sifting where you select out of those things you want to support. Then you have a support and development phase where you put moral resources into those, and then you have selecting a few of those which you then roll out as products. Now, the multinationals are very good at that process, but they're not very good at doing it quickly. Chinese companies are good at doing it quickly, but not always as thoroughly. I'm speaking of the smaller companies. The bigger companies are better at it because they become more methodical. But so in order to make that work, you have to pay attention to the culture and the incentives inside the company that give people the freedom to come up with what may be challenging ideas and the ability to put them forward and have some chance of getting them implemented. And that's where I think if there are changes going to be made to the system as a whole, I'm hoping they will focus on that. For example, in the United States, and I'm talking at the higher level now, the United States, if a university has federal money for R&D, it can use the innovations coming out of that R&D for commercial purposes. It can patent and it can make money out of that patent. The government doesn't ask for its money back. China doesn't ask for the money back either, but there's not as much freedom for universities to patent and exploit their patents in China as there is in the United States. So that's just one example of what I mean by incentives. If you have a system inside a company where people at every level, particularly people who are engineers and scientists responsible for new ideas, if they have the incentive to know that they can come up with an idea that might be pretty crazy or radical, but they won't get it knocked down immediately, they'll have to prove it, then I think you're on the way to getting a good system for innovation. It's a longer answer than I think you expected or wanted, but I hope it's helpful.
So a gentleman at the back first.
Professor, I'm a part-time PhD student in computing, and my day-time job is data scientist. And I found a method to run artificial intelligence as mobile phones, smartphones. And for example, when somebody search information from mobile, Google and Apple return many choice and links. And my artificial intelligence secretary can know the user preference and select the best result. And I think this product is not available in the world yet. And I want to buy a Vesta. Can you help me?
You might as well turn this into an innovation tomorrow. That's a great idea. I think it's needed. I'll invest. Probably some other people here will as well.
Talk to me.
But see, that's exactly the kind of thing we're talking about. It's finding a need that's not yet being satisfied. And a need is often something that is causing pain to people, causing difficulty to people. You think about when Dell started to sell computers online. You didn't have to go to a shop and actually see the physical product. They could do that because we had confidence in quality, but they also made it easy for us to do it. We didn't have to do any physical traveling. They also made it possible for us to customize the computer to some extent. They're solving a problem for the customer. I have another wonderful example. If any of you here are about to get engaged to somebody and need to buy an engagement ring, please go to the site called, what's it called? I'll have to remember the name of the site. I've forgotten it. But I'll tell you later on. But this is a site which is developed by a Stanford graduate who had the same problem. He was facing a problem of having to buy an engagement ring for his fiancée. And he went to various jewelry stores and he just hated it because everybody told him a different thing. Oh, this is better, that diamond's better, this diamond is clear, this one's bigger. He didn't know how do you make any judgment about quality? And so he started this business, which actually now makes it easy for you to do that. You go online, and step by step you can design your engagement ring or another piece of jewelry, and at each stage you can decide, do I want a brighter diamond, or I want a less clear one, do I want a different hue? He explains what all those terms mean, and you can see the additional cost of doing that at each point. And so you're getting the total cost is being built up for you as you go through it. And when you finally decide you've got what you want, you order it, it's delivered to you. If you don't like it, you send it back. So it's a fantastic site. And what's it called? It's called Blue Nile. Thank you. Who's used it? Somebody's used it. And of course there is a copycat in China now, which I haven't used.
Hi, Professor. My name is Freddie. Actually, I work in Google and we're managing an investor cup to invest in innovation. You can talk to us as well. We actually invested in one of the innovation in Hong Kong called the Maker Bay, because what the Prime Minister Li Keqiang was saying on your 5 years plan guessing, there's 2 points I want to ask about. One is Made in China 2025, about the maker movement that he is highly speaking on, about encouraging young people to make stuff with the 3D printers, CNC machines, and the all other stuff, laser cutters, etc. How do you comment on the maker movement in China? On the other hand, it's the Internet Plus, because Internet is a big boom for the last decade in China, but it seems like the Chinese Internet is not going out as fast as the manufacturing in the other industry. Could you also comment on that?
Yes. I don't know too much about what's happening in the maker movement in China, although there is one. But that's a very good way of encouraging young people to experiment and try something. And to the extent, I mean, that depends on 3D printing to a large extent, I guess. But to the extent that can be encouraged in some way, I think it's the right direction for fostering the idea of creativity in a practical way. The Internet Plus movement, which is probably will be part of the 13th five-year plan, is really a very ambitious plan to extend the internet right throughout the country, into the countryside as well, and make it a fast internet, a broadband internet. It's part of a whole series of activities, one of which, of course, is also making China a place where the CPUs for computers can be made. Now, I know you have some important views about the CPU and the network, which I think is also very interesting. But this is a very big movement, and I think it will get support in the 13th five-year plan, and I think it's going to be a big part of what happens in the future. Now, the big question, I think, to me, for the government going forward on that is going to be, how do you have a more sophisticated and faster and more extensive internet system which is still under control in some way, and where still people have some difficulty in getting out of that to the rest of the world? I don't know the answer to that, but I think the government will have to wrestle with that problem.
So we will let this gentleman ask first, then Ian and Ray.
Thank you, Professor Kearns. It's been a very insightful sharing. Thanks. Being a Chinese in this part of the world is certainly very uplifting. The sharing that you have. And I have to also congratulate you that I've not been recently for a long time actually to talks that I have to fight my way for asking questions. Yeah. So.
Maybe that's just because the others are not as civilized as you are.
No, not that. Yeah. Anyway, on the thing that you mentioned about incremental innovation, that's to me is very interesting. It's kind of against some of the conventional thinking that incremental innovation nowadays with much shorter product life cycle, business cycles is just not good enough. You have to have disruptive innovation to be a game changer, so that you can then have your ROI, within the period that is now allowed in the shortened cycle. So what's your view on that?
I think there's a lot of talk about disruptive innovation, and some industries are easier to disrupt than others, I think. And a lot of the ones that are being disrupted through internet technology. We think of Uber, and we think of Airbnb. The industry of renting a house or an apartment or something, that's physical. But the access to it and the ability to use it is through the internet. And so it's using information in a disruptive way, and it's certainly disrupting some industries. I mean, in France, Uber has been banned, and that's in a number of other countries. So disruption is happening, and when that is happening, it's happening because somebody has found a radically different way of doing something. Now, it doesn't always depend on a new piece of research or a new piece of technology. That's certainly not true for Airbnb, it's not true for Uber. It's putting together the technologies that are available in a way that satisfies an emerging need. It may be a need we're not even aware we have. You know, before Airbnb, did we know we wanted the ability to rent somebody's apartment if it was vacant? I guess we never thought of it. So, and when you go back to the iPhone when it was first invented was not really a radical single technology. It was a combination of a lot of existing technologies in a way like that, which satisfied a need we didn't even know we had. You know, we didn't know we needed to do all these things on our phone. Now we can't live without them. And so I think that was the brilliance of Jobs and his people, that they saw a way of changing our habits in a way we didn't even know we wanted to change. And then he was able to bring together the technologies to do it. He didn't have to invent he didn't have to invent the touch screen. He didn't have to invent Google Maps. He didn't have to invent GPS. Most of the technologies, not all of them, but were available. He bought quite a lot of them. So I'm not denigrating the quality of the achievement, but I think there's hope for a lot of us here, in that if we have a great idea that can do something for customers that is a problem for the moment or an opportunity for them, or even an opportunity they don't even recognize, then there's an opportunity to innovate. So we can be disruptive without necessarily having that huge R&D establishment behind us. Now, if you're making drugs or pharmaceuticals, that's not the case. But there are other ways that you have to do that. But the point I think to try to get across in any organization is that if we make innovation something that's really part of our way of life, then we'll probably get some good ideas bubbling up if we can foster them and encourage them. I'm not sure if that answers your point, but it's partial. Okay. Yes?
Hi, I'm Ian. Hello, Professor Ian. Anyway, I think I know about innovation a little bit too, even though I've actually experienced it for around 30 years in my life in Silicon Valley and in Boston, around 128. And I have one question actually is, I'd like to ask your opinion and it's linked to a few issues. So it's a little bit complicated. The first is, when I was in Silicon Valley, we need to do, I was a BPO engineer, and we need to allow scan work. That means projects not approved, there's no customer feedback, guy is on his own. It was very difficult to manage because it take away resources and take away commitments to the customer as well. But we have to let it be and no customer feedback. Okay, it's purely on the guy's vision, on his dream. So this is, and those are successful. They have to change the company. And those are very different from the model that get the feedback from the customer. And Steve Jobs has also said, it is not the customer's job to tell us what they want. And it's also Gordon Bell's opinion that we can beat Apple. But Steve Jobs has one thing is very powerful. He knows what the customer wants, but the customer don't even know what they want. Okay, so so what I'm trying to, so there's one is this scum work without customers' involvement. The other thing is incremental innovation is destructive in the long run for any company. Look at history. IBM, Wang, Silicon Graphics, digital equipment, they all do that. They all went down. The problem with incremental innovation is that the step is getting too small and it offers no value. William Hewlett and David Packard are really against this. Okay? The HP waves, right? So that's the second issue, which is related altogether. And the third one is if there is, how do you sustain innovation if you encourage, keep talking to the customer, because the customer wants minor change, minor improvement. It's good for your pocket in the next 1 year or 2 years. and your thing cannot sustain. For example, how come nowadays, if you look at history, in the 70s and the 80s, there are a lot of breakthrough innovation. In the 90s to nowadays, there's hardly any. They all are incremental innovation. And this is a big change. What happened here?
Well, that's a really great set of questions. We have 2 or 3 hours? Because it would take a long time for me to even attempt, and I don't pretend to be able to answer them all. So I'll just make a few comments, if I may. You're making your second point is a very well-known one, and that is what Harvard researcher called the innovator's dilemma. And he wrote a book about this, a fellow called Clayton Christensen of Harvard Business School some years ago. And he made the very point you're making, that if you look around at what companies are doing most of the time, we're trying to improve what we offer our customers by a small amount. We want to just keep ahead of where we think the customer's need is going. And if we can do that, and if our competitors don't do it quite as quickly as we do, then we're going to make some benefit out of that. And so that's incremental innovation. And Clayton Christensen made the point, which you've also made, that there may be something happening in a skunk works somewhere that we don't know anything about that is taking a different approach. It's a more radical approach. They found a way to cut the costs by 10% or 100%, something like that. And if we're not focused on that, then we'll keep on doing what we're doing. And this radical innovation may actually happen in an area which we don't think is very important. Disk drive is the example that he used for that. Some of you may remember the days when there was a thing called a Winchester drive, which was about the size of a barrel of oil, and it had a huge rotating set of disks in it, which was used for memories. Then somebody invented the floppy disk that you put into your computer, and that was 8.5 inches in diameter. And then somebody came up with a 5.25 inch one, and so on and so on. So Christensen makes the point that when those evolutions of technology were happening, the existing incumbents in the industry didn't notice them, because initially they were dealing with a market that wasn't our main market. If somebody wants a smaller drive for some particular need, okay, that's not going to bother us. And so there's a danger there, a very significant danger, that you'll miss out on the big innovations. The poster child for this is probably Kodak. But Kodak was aware of digital technology. It just couldn't shift its resources fast enough because it has so much committed to film. And that's a big problem. The legacy of what you're carrying sometimes prevents you from moving where you feel you want to go. And so that's a problem I think that every company has to be aware of. How do you deal with it? Well, I think you may have to be more open to encouraging skunk works, as you say. And a few companies do this in a smaller way. I mean, 3M, for example, has the policy of 1 day a week you can work on your own project if you're a research scientist or an engineer. So you can work on whatever you like. And hopefully some ideas will come up that will be useful for the company. The post-it notes is the famous example of something that wasn't meant to happen. And so that's one. And Google, you're with Google, you have a policy of, I think, a day a week also for people to work on things. Usually it's something related to the business, but it's your own idea, as I understand.
Can be unrelated.
Sorry?
Can be totally unrelated.
Can be unrelated, good, that's great. And so that's an idea, say, clever people don't want to be put into a straitjacket. Clever people want freedom, they want the feeling they're doing something important, they want to do it their way, and maybe the Skunk Works is the only way to make that happen, or giving people a day a week. And I think the idea behind that is not just to get the great innovation that will come, of course you want that, but it's also to make an environment in which you'll have the right people, and those right people will be more likely to make it happen.
Last question.
So I'm sorry that I haven't.
Maybe I invite the gentleman at the back from that side to ask first.
The ladies.
Hi, I'm Joanna. A quick question. You mentioned outbound investing briefly, and I was just wondering, what do you see? Do you think that the growth in outbound investing by Chinese companies, so they're more significantly operating in, say, Europe and America, how that's going to impact the pace of innovation and also the pace of regulatory harmonization in, say, like sustainability or governance?
That's a very interesting question too. Thanks, Jody. I think that the people that will be most hurt by it will be multinationals in their home markets. And that's a big threat for them. So that's why I encourage them to be much more active here, innovating in China, so they'll be prepared. Whether it will affect innovation in China, I think is probably not likely to be the case. I think it will be beneficial, provided the companies do what, for example, Geely is trying to do, what Good Baby does, which is to exchange ideas from the different markets in which it operates. They have research centers in those foreign markets, and the big key is whether you can interchange those ideas within the company. If you can do that, then you're learning for the China market as well as for the other markets. So a lot of this comes down to internal processes. And to come back to this gentleman's point earlier, this is not an answer to your question, but it's a suggestion. There's a book written by a couple of academics whose names are Govinda Rajan and Trimble, and it's called The Other Side of Innovation. And it focuses very much on how you deal with an idea, and you made this point, how do you deal with getting something done inside a company when you've got to run the business at the same time? Most companies are concerned with getting out the products for tomorrow's market and making your budgets and your numbers. And they address this question that inside every company that wants to be innovative, you have to have a team that's doing the innovation. And it's not just the R&D group, it's people that are carrying it forward into real products and services. And having that group has a different set of values, it has different time constraints, it has different objectives from the rest of the company that's focused on getting the business done. They actually give it a different name. They call it the innovation team, and they call the rest of the company the performance engine, which is getting things done. Now, they have some recommendations as to how to deal with that, which answers your question a little bit, but it has a lot to do with teamwork and also setting up abilities to use resources that are taken from the existing business and put into the innovation team. I can't answer it really properly, but it does come, I think, down to organizational process.
So, thank you, Professor. I guess some of our guests can ask other questions afterwards. So thank you very much for your participation. And so we wish you have a nice evening. Thank you.
Thank you.